Bugünkü harika sunumumuza. Bugün uzaklardan misafirlerimiz var. Evet, bir dakika daha bekliyoruz. Ondan sonra resmen toplantıyı başlatacağız. Şimdiden 40 kişi kadar olduk.
İyi akşamlar herkese.
Hoş geldin Murat Kaptan.
Merhaba.
İyi akşamlar.
Hoş geldin.
İyi akşamlar
Sema, hoş geldin.
geldin.
Sema
Evet,
nasılsın? Sema hoş geldin.
Herkese Dubai'den selamlar.
Selamlar. Selam Kutlu.
Selamlar.
Hoş geldin.
Teşekkürler.
İyi akşamlar.
İyi akşamlar Eren Hocam.
Merhaba.
İyi akşamlar.
Eyvallah, sağ ol. Ne yapalım? Cumartesi günleri böyle güzel oluyor.
Tarkan selam, nasılsın?
Merhaba.
Serap,
Göremiyorum.
Serap.
Ha selam. Göremedim ya.
Ay çok ışık, çok durun, ışığımı yakayım.
Harika, iyi
akşamlar.
İyi akşamlar.
Toplantımıza başlıyorum. Saatiniz geldi.
Tamam,
Müsaadenizle.
kapatıyorum. Görüşürüz
Toplantımız
Tarkan.
başlıyor.
Görüşürüz.
Evet, hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Yeni bir SUFOD toplantısında.
Tamam, kapatıyorum. Görüşürüz Tarkan.
Evet, hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Hepiniz hoş geldiniz tekrar. Bugün uzaklardan misafirlerimiz var. Lembeh'ten sevgili Tarkan burada. Aynı zamanda da James, ama James şu anda İngiltere'de, kendi ülkesinde. Bugün yine harika bir söyleşimiz olacak. Tarkan hoş geldin diyorum öncelikle.
Teşekkürler, hoş bulduk. İyi akşamlar herkese.
Nasılsın? Biraz geç herhalde değil mi? Seni bu saate kadar tuttuk ama.
Hiç önemli değil, teşekkürler. Şu anda saat 2, sabah 2. Ama önemli değil, 6. kahvemdeyim. Hiç sorun değil.
Harika. Çok teşekkür ediyoruz tekrar, hem kabul ettiğin için hem de
çok
bu saate
mersi.
kadar beklediğin için bizi. James, you are welcome as well. Hi there. So James aslında İngilizce kanalında olduğu için muhtemelen bizi duymuyor. Birazdan öncelikle sevgili Tarkan sunumunu yapacak. Daha sonra James'e geçeceğiz. James de İngilizce takip etmek isteyenler için bazı yönergelerimiz olacak. Türkçe dinlemek isteyenler için de çünkü konuşmayı simultane tercüme edeceğiz sizler için. SUFOD daha yeni bir yenilik yaparak sizlere bu hizmeti de getirdi. Bundan sonra getireceğimiz yurt dışından konuklarımız için de böyle hizmetlerimiz olacak inşallah. Ben bir de Ateş Başkanıma sözü vermek istiyorum. Ateş Hocam, buradaysan sen de bir merhaba der misin misafirlerimize?
Teşekkür ederim Murat'an. Herkese iyi akşamlar. Hoş geldiniz hepiniz. Dediğin gibi özellikle Tarkan'ı çok yoruyoruz. James'in saati uygun ama Tarkan bayağı bizim için fedakarlık yapıyor. Tekrar teşekkür ederiz ona.
Estağfurullah.
Benim için de özel bir gün bugün. Tarkan, sen biliyorsun, söyledim de sana. Benim yurt dışında en fazla gittiğim yer Lembeh. Yani 7. defa gittim. 7. defa da seninle orada karşılaştık.
Evet.
Senin de orada olman bizim için ayrı bir hem avantaj hem bir keyif. Niye 7 defa gittim? Çünkü hakikaten su fotoğrafçısı için bir okul gibi bir yer. Yani her gittiğinde yeni bir şey öğreniyorsun. Her gittiğinde kendini geliştiriyorsun. O yüzden hani ben bugünkü sunumu böyle bir kurumun ön planda bir tanıtımı içinde değil de bir sualtı fotoğraf okulu gibi gördüğüm için ayrıca bir değer veriyorum. Yani bunu öyle görmeleri lazım. Çünkü Lembeh gerçekten öyle bir yer. Övgüye çok değer bir yer. Sualtı fotoğrafçıları için vazgeçilmez bir yer. Hani ben oraya götürdüğüm, beraber gittiğim arkadaşlarımdan da yani bir defa gidip de kalan çok az oldu. Hep 2., 3. hatta 5. sefer gelen arkadaşlarımız oldu. Çünkü fotoğrafçı gerçekten kendini orada geliştiriyor. Bu bir gerçek. Neyse, ben daha fazla uzatmayayım lafı. Kendi duygularımı hemen bir söyleyeyim, çekileyim. Ben de bugün sizlerden gene yeni bir şeyler öğreneceğiz mutlaka. Tekrar teşekkür ederiz tüm dernek üyeleri adına, katılımcılar adına. Tarkan.
Teşekkürler.
Sevgili Tarkan, ben sözü sana vermek istiyorum.
Tamam.
Sunumu olacak zannediyorum. Bir de bir video gösterimi de olacak. İstersen sen birazcık hem kendinden hem bulunduğun bölgeden hem de tesisten bahsedebilirsin. Tabii bütün bunları sunumun içerisinde de yapabilirsin. Seni yetkilendirmişim zaten. Dilediğin zaman sunuma başlayabilirsin. Teşekkür ediyorum şimdiden.
Okay, çok mersi, teşekkürler. Lembeh'ten sunumumuza hoş geldiniz. Öncelikle Ateş Hocama, ProWild ve SUFOD ekiplerine bize bu sunum fırsatı verdiğiniz ve tüm misafirlerimize de pazar akşamında bize zaman verdiğiniz için teşekkür ederiz. Benim adım Tarkan ve iş arkadaşım Lembeh'ten Foto Pro'su James ile bu akşamki sunumumuza başlayacağız. Tabii bu arada kelime hafızam bayağı daralmış ve bazen de dilim dönmediğinden dolayı şimdiden Türkçem için özür dilemek isterim. Senelerdir ilk defa bir Türkçe sunum yapacağım. Ama kısaca bir tanıtayım kendimi. İşte deniz tutkunluğum 1979'da Datça ve Bodrum'da babamla ilk dalışma yaptıktan sonra başladı. Her yaz Takip'te Ankara Koleji'nden mezun olana kadar işte babamla dalışlara devam ettim. 1989'da İngiltere'ye göç ettim. 94'te PADI ilk sertifikamı aldım. Tabii gölde soğuk su ve kuru elbise dalışları pek sarmadığından dolayı İngiltere'deyken bile işte Bodrum'a gelip yaz sezonlarında Ege Dalış Merkezi'nde hem dalış eğitmenliği, işte dalış operasyonu olsun veyahut da dalış sektörünün ticaret detaylarını öğrendim. Bu arada hemen Murat İçel'e, Murat Draman'a, Kenan Doğan'a bana geçen emeklerinden dolayı teşekkürleri borç bilirim bu arada. Neyse, işte 2005 yılı itibariyle de Karayipler'den Kızıldeniz'e, Ege Denizi'nden işte Güneydoğu Asya'da birçok ülkede tekne operasyonu, eğitmenlik, yöneticilik yaptım. Eşim Katrin'le birlikte de yaklaşık 9 senedir Endonezya'da yaşıyoruz. İşte bunun 3 senesi Eco Lembe ya da Doğu Kalimantan'da özel dalış adası olan Nabuco'da. Son 2 senedir de işte Lembe Resort'un yöneticiliğini yapıyoruz. Tabii yaklaşık da 14 senedir de su altı videosuyla ilgileniyorum. Böyle. Şimdi tabii James de kendisini bu büyük ihtimalle tanıtacak sunumundan önce. Ben şimdi hemen sunumuna geçeyim. Okay. Sunumun başlıkları Lembe Boğazı'ndan bahsedeceğim. Makro canlılarından bahsedeceğim. Lembe Resort tesisimizden bahsedeceğim. Dalış ve fotoğraflama servislerimizden bahsedeceğim. Bir de tabii bu şu andaki durumumuz olan pandemideki durumundan bahsedeceğim hepinize. Başladığımız zaman bilmiyorum daha önce Endonezya'ya gelmiş olanlar ve Endonezya'da bulunmuş olanlar haricindekiler için Lembe Resort'un coğrafik konumunu görüyorsunuz burada. Yeşil renkli
Paylaşım
olan...
yapmadın sanıyorum henüz. Tarkan, biz bir şey görmüyoruz.
Öyle mi? Tamam peki. Pardon. Bir saniye hemen şey yapayım. Okay. Görebiliyor muyuz şimdi?
Sunum moduna da alırsan şu anda
Tamam.
notlarınla gözüküyor.
Tamam.
Evet, çok güzel.
Tamam, harika. Okey. Tamam, şimdi burası Güneydoğu Asya'nın haritası. Yeşil renkte olan kısım Endonezya. Endonezya yaklaşık 17.500 tane adadan oluşuyor. Buraya ulaşım, tam ortada Manado havaalanı işareti olan yerde Kuzey Sulawesi, biz Sulawesi adasındayız. Ulaşım olarak gayet rahat geliniyor aslında. İstanbul'dan Ateş Hocam da biliyor zaten. Katar ya da ne bileyim Emirates ya da Singapur Hava Yolları ile birlikte Singapur'a gelebiliyorsunuz veyahut da doğadan direkt Jakarta'ya uçabiliyorsunuz. Singapur'dan yaklaşık 3,5 saatlik veya Bali'den ya da Jakarta'dan 3 saatlik uçuşla Manado Havaalanı'na varabiliyorsunuz. Burası Kuzey Sulawesi'nin üst kısmı, yani bulunduğumuz bölge. Manado Havaalanı'ndan yaklaşık 1 saat 15 dakika özel yolla birlikte bizim resort'a ulaşmanız mümkün. Burada gördüğünüz drone fotoğrafında ise sağ taraftaki ada Lembe adası, sol tarafta Anakara. Hızlı teknelerimizle zaten 5 dakikalık mesafede hemen varabiliyorsunuz resortumuza. Hemen şeye çok benziyor. İstanbul Boğazı'na bayağı benzeyen bir yer. Lembe Boğazı'nda yaklaşık 70'ten fazla dalış bölgemiz var. Ve farklı habitatlarda çok çeşitli makro canlıları olan, mercan üçgeninin ortasında dünya ünlü biliyorsunuz. Hatta dünyanın makro canlıları başkenti olarak bilinen önemli bir bölge. Sualtı topografisi ağırlıklı olarak siyah kum. Tabii ki de beyaz kumumuz da var. Hatta moloz, yani rubble dediğimiz moloz veya mercan dalış noktaları olan bir boğaz. Snorkeling için de gayet uygun.
Niye ses çıkmadı buradan?
Tüm yıl boyunca kolay koşullara sahip, çok az veya hiç akıntı olmayan ve su sıcaklığı yaklaşık 26 ile 30 derece değişen bir bölge. Boğaz'da ki ikonik canlıların bazılarını sıralamak gerekirse bildiğiniz gibi Blue Ring Octopus'tan tutun işte Bargibenti Pygmy Seahorse'lar, işte Flamboyant Cuttlefish'ler, çok özel bir Mandarin fish dalışımız da var. Aynı zamanda benim en favori ahtapotum kokan oktopus. Ahtapotların 13 değişik türünü Lembeh'te görme ihtimaliniz var aslında. Hatta 2 türü daha da bulundu. Yaklaşık 15 çeşit ahtapotumuz var burada. Uzun senelerde dünyanın çeşitli bölgelerinde daldım ve çalıştım ve 15 çeşit ahtapot olan bir bölge daha duymadım ya da görmedim. Çok ender rastlanan bir durum doğrusu. Tabii aynı zamanda geniş açı fotoğraf fırsatları yaratan mercan dalışlarımız da mümkün. Okay, şimdi bizim Lembe Resort'umuzu tanıtayım kısaca. Lembe Adası'nda yağmur ormanlarıyla çevrili özel bir koyda 2002'de açıldı. Geniş bir arazi parçasına yayılmış ve tüm dalış alanlarına yakın olan gerçekten mükemmel konuma sahip. Sadece 20 odamız var. Butik bir resort. Ve birçok ödüle de sahip bu arada. İşte Best of the Best Travelers Choice Award, işte Travelers Choice Award, TripAdvisor Lembe listelerinde yaklaşık 10 seneye aşkın bir numarayız. Aynı zamanda Sustainability ve Conservation ödüllerimizde 2 sene önce Singapur ve Almanya'dan da aldık. Burası merkezi resortun. Küçük koyumuzun siyah kumlu plajı yüksek gelgitte su altında kayboluyor. O yüzden güzel bir yüzme havuzu bölgesi yapıldı. Pool deck'te işte güneş ışıkları alanları ve havuz barımız, havuzun arkasında restoran, fotoğrafının solunda dalış merkezi var. Sağ ve sol üst tarafta da deniz manzaralı balkonlarımız var. Ateş hocam çok iyi bilir burayı. Havuzdakinden gün batımı. İşte fotoğrafta bulutsuz günlerde yanardağların arkasında güneşin kayboluşunu seyrederken su üzerindeki şahane gün batımlarının yansımalarını da görebiliyoruz. Günü akşam yemeğinden önce soğuk bira ya da ne bileyim özel bir kokteyle sohbet ederek de sonlandırmanın güzel bir yoludur orası. Odalarımıza gelince burası bizim Cliffside villamız. Bir salon ve bir yatak odasından oluşuyor. 180 derecelik Lembe Boğazı manzarası ve çağrı üzerine butler hizmetine sahip özel havuzlu bir villamız. Villa aslında Lembeh'te bu tipteki tek özel villa. İç mimarisine gelince de işte gerçekten inanılmaz güzel bir manzarası var. Üst tarafta görüyorsunuz havuzdan manzarayı. Sol alt kısmı yatak odası. Hatta yatak odasından sürme kapıları açıp her sabah havuza da atlayabilirsiniz burada. Salonu. Ve aynı zamanda geniş banyosunda da çift lavabosu, açık ve kapalı hava duş bölümleri, özel havuz kenarı, güneş yatakları da mevcut. Bunun haricinde 13 tane lüks bungalovumuz var. Sustainability yani sürdürülebilirlik ve çevre göz önünde bulundurularak inşa edilmişler. İnşaat malzemeleri ek enerji tasarrufu veya yalıtım sağlayacak şekilde tasarlandı. Su kullanımını azaltan işte düşük akışlı musluklar, suyu geri dönüştürmek için su toplama sistemleri, işte bungalow'un içindeki diğer bütün elektrikli eşyalar enerji tasarrufu olarak yapılmış. Tabii banyosu da zaten aynı şekilde hem açık bölümü var hem de kapalı bölümü var. Bir de tabii bu lüks bungalowlardan modern yaşam alanları, işte ek oturma alanları, bol miktarda storage alanına da sahip. Diğer oda çeşitlerimizde tropikal bahçe içi odalarımız. Yalnız seyahat edenler ve daha bütçe odaklı olanlar için ideal olan bir odalar. 6 adet bahçe içi odamız var. Bahçe içi odaları aynı zamanda restoran, lobi, fotoğraf ve dalış merkezi gibi tesis olanaklarının yakınında da elverişli konuma sahip. Tabii bu odaların bütün konforlar da mevcut. İşte kliması, minibarı, sıcak suyu ve geniş banyosu da var. Onun haricinde coğrafi konumuz Wallace hattının doğusunda olduğu için fauna ve florası da çok değişik. Resortumuzun tropical bahçelerinde daha önce görmediğiniz birçok canlıyı keşfedebileceğinizden eminim. Hatta eğer topside makro fotoğrafçılığı ilgileniyorsanız çok eğleneceğinizden eminim. Burası bizim restoranımız ve lobimiz. Açık hava restoranı. Boğaz manzaralı tabii ki. Barımız da burada. Aynı zamanda Lembeh Resort yemekleriyle de bayağı ünlüdür. Oda fiyatlarına günde 3 öğün yemek dahildir. Menülerimizde yerel ve Avrupa yemekleri dahil çok çeşitli seçeneklerimiz var. Ayrıca mümkün olduğu kadar yerel çiftçileri ve balıkçıları da destekliyoruz. Menüde her zaman vejetaryen seçenekleri de var ve eğitimli şeflerimizle özel diyet isteklerinizi de karşılayabiliriz. İşte gluten free olsun, laktoz free olsun, vegan olsun vesaire vesaire. Tabii ufak mahzenimiz de var şaraplar için. İşte ithal içkilere kadar işte likör, kokteyl menüsü de içeren iyi stoklanmış bir barımız da var. Dalış merkezimize gelince teknelerimiz gördüğünüz gibi aslında tekne sayımızı 8'e kadar çıkartabiliyoruz. Özellikle grup olarak gelindiğinde mümkün olduğu kadar her gruba özel bir tekne verebiliyoruz. Teknelerimiz değişik ebatlarda ve her teknede tuvalet ve bol miktarda alan olup kameralar için durulama tankları, tekneye çıkışları için uzun sağlam merdiven, güneşli ve gölgeli alanlar. Ayrıca her dalışa giriş ve dönüşte su, kahve, çay ve snackler konuklar için de hazırlanıyor. Ve çoğu dalış noktamızda 2 dakika ile 15 dakika içerisinde de ulaşabiliyoruz. Dalış merkezi hemen bizim teknelerin yanında olduğu için lockerlarımız da gayet, yani soyunma alanları da gayet geniş. Her dalış ekipmanı ve kamera için ayrı durulama tanklarıyla donatılmış durumda. Ayrıca her odanın kendisine has 2 kişilik locker'ı da var. Bu slide'da gördüğünüz ön taraf bizim house reef'imiz. Ve gerçekten kıyıya sadece bir adım uzaklıkta ve misafirlerimiz diledikleri zaman rehberli ya da rehbersiz buraya dalabiliyorlar. Özellikle kameralarınızı denemek için veyahut da özel bir teknik denemek istiyorsanız ve vaktiniz daha çok vakit geçirmek istiyorsunuz suyun altında, o gayet uygun. Deniz biyologları ve rehberlerimiz tarafından bakım yapılan yapılar ve mercan fidanlığının çalışmalarımız da halen devam ediyor House Reef'imizde. Gördüğünüz gibi artık mercanlarımız da büyümeye başladı. Hatta daha önce yapılan bu fidanlıklar artık biraz sevgi ve özenle işte biraz da güneş ve besinlerle House Reef'imizde güzel yuvalar yapmayı başardık. Jeotumuzda çalışan full-time deniz biyologları var. Ayrıca konuklara isim, işte türler, kimliği konusunda da yardımcı oluyorlar. Ayrıca dalış liderlerimizi ve rehberlerimizi deniz yaşamı sunumları için yapmak için de eğitiyorlar. Burada çalışan dalış liderlerinin rehberlerinin kolektif dalış toplamı 70.000 üzerinde. Ateş Hocam da iyi bilir. Rehberlere kartal gözü deriz. Bu arada daha önce Lembeh'te dalmış olanlar için herkese Sandro, Fendi, Wadley ve Opokeçi'den çok selam. Dalış rehberlerinin tamamı aynı zamanda su altı fotoğrafçılığı ve deniz biyolojisi eğitimlidirler. Full-time işte marine biyolojistlerimiz de kapsamlı ve eğitim ve testlerden geçiriyorlar. Burası kamera odamız. Tabii su altı fotoğrafçılığı deneyamızda olduğu için de kamera odamızda en ince detayla gözlem olarak tasarlandı. 28 adet değişik ebatlarda işte kendi ışığı, havlusu ve birçok uluslararası prizi olan workstationlarımız var. Kamera odası dalış merkezine ve teknelere çok yakın olduğundan kameralarınızı taşırken fazla uzağa gitmenize de gerek kalmıyor. Evet, biliyorsunuz fotoğraf merkezimiz var. Cameras at Lembeh Resort diye geçiyor. İşte 2009 yılında kuruldu. Ve Güneydoğu Asya'daki şu anda 2019 tarihinden itibaren Backscatter'ın tek yetkili fotoğraf merkezi. Tabii bu fotoğraf merkezimizde full-time fotopro ve 3 kişilik eğitimli asistanları ev sahibi yapılıyor. Fotopromuz James fotoğraf kursları oldukça popüler bu arada. Ve fotoğraf merkezimizle ilgili tüm detayları James size sunumunda göreceksiniz. Burası içerisi. Sol üstte Lembeh Resort sahipleri, işte dalış merkezi sahibi ve Backscatter'ın sahibini görüyorsunuz. Burada çok sayıda Backscatter'dan gelen satılık ve kiralama olan stoklarımız var. Fotoğraf merkezi ekibi sahada onarımlar yapabiliyorlar. Bu nedenle küçük bir sızdırma veya ne bileyim ateşlemeyen bir flaşınız varsa ekipmanlarınızı bir an önce dalışa hazır etmek için ekibimiz ellerinden geleni yapacaklardır. Ayrıca fotoğraf merkezimizde 3D printerımız da var. Bu da ufak tefek parçalar yapımında kullanıyoruz. James'den bu konuda ya da ekipman stoklarımız hakkında detaylı bilgileri alabilirsiniz tabii. Ayrıca her yıl uluslararası profesyonellerle çeşitli sualtı fotoğraf ve sualtı bilimleri için atölyeler organize ediyoruz. İnşallah Ateş hocamızla ve grubunda her yıl olduğu gibi önümüzdeki Aralık ayının atölyesinde de misafir edeceğiz. Bu arada Lembeh Resort bayağı bir ünlü olduğu için BBC olsun, Nat Geo olsun, Animal Planet gibi uluslararası TV kanallarında Lembeh'te tek dalış ve çekimleri için sık sık misafir ediyoruz. Bu arada Blackwater ve Bonfire dalışlarına başladık. Yaklaşık 6 aydır bunları organize ediyoruz. Bilmiyorum bilenleriniz var mı? Bunlar işte güneş batımı, mandarin fish ya da gece dalışları dışında. Burada sıra dışı deniz yaşamını derinden görmek isteyenler için yeni bir trend haline gelmiş durumdalar. Bugüne kadar gördüklerimiz işte plankton olsun, larva seviyesi canlıları gerçekten büyüleyici ve mükemmel sualtı fotoğrafçılık fırsatları yaratıyorlar. Bu tür dalışları Lembeh'te tek güvenli şekilde organize edilen sayılı resortlardan da birisiyiz aynı zamanda. Kısaca Blackwater Dive. Blackwater Dive bu şekilde yapılıyor. Daha önce bu dalış tarzını tecrübe etmeyenler için şöyle söyleyeyim. Blackwater deneyimi yalnızca açık okyanusda gerçekleşiyor. Yüzeydeki ışıklı şamandıradan alt halata bağlanabiliyorsunuz veyahut da eğer yüzerliğinize güvenebiliyorsanız halatın yanında da dalışı yapabiliyorsunuz. Şamandırayı da tekne yukarıdan takip ediyor. Dalış bitiminde tekne sizi yukarıda bekliyor oluyor. Bu da bonfire dalışı. Bu sığ sularda kum ve moloz üzerinde veya resifin yakınında yapılıyor. Bonfire dalışı sığ sulardaki larva seviyesindeki canlıları incelemek için harika bir yol. Ve eğer hiç Blackwater dalışı yapmadıysanız sizlere tavsiyem bonfire dalışıyla başlayıp efendim tecrübelenip Blackwater'a hazırlık yapabiliyorsunuz. Birkaç fotoğraf göstereyim hemen Blackwater dalışlarından. Jellyfish'in içindeki balık, işte pompanun yavrusu, işte larva halinde olan Wonderpuss oktopusu, Nautilus, hatta Nautilus'lar genelde deniz anasının üzerinde yüzüyorlar. Böyle bir fotoğraf fırsatları yaratıyor. Kısaca ve dalış yapmanın zamanları içinde birçok diğer aktivitelerimiz de var. Eğer mesela eşinizle geldiğiniz zaman eğer eşiniz de almıyorsa sıkılmayacaklarından emin olabilirsiniz. Yani bölgeyi kanoyla keşfetmekten tutun işte mangrove turları, şelalelere gidiş, yanardağ yaylarındaki zengin Endonezya kültürünü görmek, işte ne bileyim ya da şeflerimizle de bu yörenin geleneksel yemek pişirme kurslarında aktivitelerimizden arasında. Özellikle doğal ortamlarında dünyanın hiçbir yerinde göremeyeceğiniz endemik hayvanları fotoğraflamak için bir yağmur ormanı olan Tankoko National Park'a keşif gezileri de yapabiliyorsunuz. Burada endemik türden işte ne bileyim siyah tepeli makaklar sol tarafta, sol altta. En küçük primat olan Tarsius sağ üstte. Bunun gibi ne bileyim tukandı, kuskus ayısıydı falan bir sürü endemik hayvan görme ihtimalimiz var. Bu keşif gezisi açısında konuklarımız arasındaki en popüler aktivitelerden uçuştan önceki günde dalışlar bittiği zaman işte efendim öğlen yemeğinden sonra yapılan bir tür genelde. Evet, şimdi Ve eminim ki herkesin aklında olan pandemik zamandaki protokollerimiz nedir? Ne tür hazırlıklar yaptık? Ne normal, yeni normal nasıldır? Sorunu cevaplayacak kısa bir video hazırladık. Umarım sizin bütün soru işaretlerinizi cevaplayacak bir video. Ufak bir not olarak da bütün ekibimiz bu protokoller hakkında eğitimlerini tamamladı. Hatta ilk aşılarımızda olduk. İkinci aşı sıramız Haziran'ın ilk haftasındadır. Gördüğünüz sertifikalarda Sağlık ve Turizm Bakanlığı müfettişleri tarafından yapılan incelemelerden sonra %100 notla aldığımız COVID süreci operasyon sertifikalarımız. Umarım videoyu beğenirsiniz. Murat Han, istersen videoyu başlatabilirsin.
Evet, ben de. Senin sunumun bitti değil mi? Şimdi kısa bir videomuz olacak. Ondan sonra da James'i alacağız. Ben COVID ile ilgili yaptığınız kısa videoyu açıyorum o zaman bu bağlamda. Senin ekran paylaşımını durduruyorum.
Tamam, lütfen.
Okay. Evet, çok teşekkür ederiz. Harika sunum ve hazırladığınız bu video için sevgili Tarkan. Biraz sonra James'e bağlanacağız ama hem teşekkür etmek istedim hem de senin söylemek istediğin bir şey varsa izleyicilerimize sözü sana veriyorum. Sesin kapalı sanıyorum Tarkan. Şöyle
Duyabiliyor muyuz şimdi?
Evet, şimdi okey.
Tamam, süper. Okey. Tamam, bu küçük Slovezi gezisinde bize katıldığınız için teşekkür ederim. Umarım beğenmişsinizdir. Hepimizi işte tekrar normal zamanları dört gözle bekliyoruz. Seyahat kısıtlamaları kalktığında umarım sizleri de aramızda görme fırsatına erişebileceğiz. Bu arada Ateş Hocama da çok teşekkür ederim. Ve umarım eğer dediğim gibi yani eğer dünyanın her ucunda bir su altı fotoğraflama seyahati planlıyorsanız bunu sizlere en iyi organize edecek kuruluş ProWild Travel Seyahat Acentası ve tüm rezervasyonun işlemlerinizi güvenli ve kolaylıkla bu ProWild'dan yapabilirsiniz. Evet, çok teşekkür ederim. Çok mersi. Artık sözü herhalde James'e bırakıyorum ben.
Evet, teşekkür ederim Tarkan Hocam. Buradasın, bizde misin? Çok da geç
Tabii,
oldu.
tabii. Yok
Okey.
yok, sizleyim.
Harika. Teşekkür ediyoruz.
Tamam.
Sağ ol, emeklerin için, beklediğin için bu saate kadar bizi teşekkür ediyoruz. Tekrar yine
Çok
belki
mersi.
cevap kısmında bağlanabiliriz. Bu arada belki de James'e bağlanmadan önce şöyle bir soru sormak istiyorum. Eğer izleyicilerimizden Tarkan'a sorusu olan varsa şimdi yöneltmek için iyi bir zaman olabilir. İlerleyen dakikalarda da olabilir. Çünkü James'in fotoğraf üzerine yapacağı sunumlar arasında da bir ara vereceğiz. O zaman da sorabilirsiniz. Ama ben buradan şimdi ben konuşurken bir el kaldırma işareti görürsem ona söz vereceğim. Yoksa James'e bağlanacağım. Tekrar teşekkür ediyoruz sevgili Tarkan. Tez vakitte Lembeh'te görüşmek üzere diyorum. Umarım
İnşallah.
bu lanet virüsten kurtuluruz bir an önce.
İnşallah.
Artık aşılarla mı yoksa işte doğal olarak bağışıklık kazanarak mı olur bu? Ama inşallah
Evet.
sağ salim oralara gelebiliriz diye ümit ediyoruz.
İnşallah.
Teşekkür ediyoruz tekrar bize ayırdığın vakit
Çok mersi.
için.
Sağ ol.
Görüşmek üzere diyorum.
Sağ ol.
James'e bağlanıyorum. Bu arada bir açıklama yapacağım. James'in konuşması, James'e merhaba demeden önce bunu yapmak istedim size, izleyicilerimize. James'e yapacağımız bu aşamadan sonraki sohbetin tamamı İngilizce bilmeyenler için tercüme edilecek. Simultane tercüme konusunda bize destek veren arkadaşımızla tarafından. Şimdi bunun için ne yapmanız gerekiyor onu anlatacağım. Öncelikle İngilizce kanalında kalmak isteyenler Zoom'un sağ altında bulunan dil bölümünden İngilizceyi seçecekler. Eğer çeviriyi dinlemek isteyen olursa onlar da Türkçe bölümüne geçecekler. Yani bu aşamadan sonra lütfen ya İngilizceye ya Türkçe'ye geçin. Ara ara chat bölümünden arkadaşlarım da size ne yapmanız gerekiyor konusunda destek verebilirler. Ben de yazabilirim eğer o sırada konuşmuyorsam. Ama şu aşamadan sonra lütfen ya İngilizce ya da Türkçe kanalına geçelim. James'e merhaba dedikten sonra. Hi James, do you hear me?
I do. Hello.
Hi, welcome. How are you doing?
Very well.
Okay, so from now on, I just inform my friends to either to switch to English or Turkish. So if you don't mind, let's switch to English together. And for those who want to stay in English channel, will come to English channel. And those who want to speak the translated Turkish language, they should switch to Turkish language. Tekrar ediyorum. İngilizce devam etmek isteyenler lütfen benimle beraber İngilizce kanalına geçsin. Nereden? Zoom programının sağ alt köşesinden, dil bölümünden. Türkçe çeviriyi dinlemek isteyenler de Türkçe bölümüne geçebilirler. James, we are switching to English.
Okay.
Okay. So James, are you there?
Yep, English now.
Okay. So from now on, I'm going to speak English with James, and those who are in this English channel will hear this communication. Otherwise, who stay in Turkish channel will hear the interpretation, the translation of this dialogue. So James, welcome again. How are you doing? Where are you? Tell me about yourself. Where are you? What time is where you are?
Okay, so I am currently back in the UK. Hope to be back in Lembeh very, very soon. The time here, it's just gone past 7:30, so just a couple of hours behind you guys.
Okay, perfect. So it's not as bad as Tarkan. It means
No, I don't need the coffee.
okay. So maybe a couple of beers next to your desk. Okay, cool. So what are we going to speak about today?
Okay, let me share my screen.
Okay, please do so.
Okay, can we see that fine?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah,
By the way,
again,
did you also
thank you.
click the sound options? Did you click?
Yes, I did.
Okay, perfect.
So again, thank you for inviting us to talk with you guys today. So my name is James Emery. I'm the photo pro at Lembeh Resort. I have personally been working in Asia as a professional photographer and videographer for the last 10 years, but been with Lembeh Resort for the last 2 years. So today, what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit more detail about the kind of diving, the macro diving that we do have at Lembeh, and share with you some tips and some tricks about how we can actually spice up our macro portfolios. So hopefully you can take some of these ideas away and get some good results when you come and visit us. Okay, so first of all, talking about our photo center. So if I'm not diving, this is the building you're going to find me in. This is my little office, our photo center, or what I like to call my man cave, because we've got some really cool gadgets inside. So we are the only authorized backscatter photo center in Asia. If you guys don't know who Backscatter are the biggest retailer of underwater photography equipment in the world. So we've been able to build up a relationship with Backscatter, and it enables us to sell and also have equipment for rental. So for anyone that doesn't have a camera who wants to try underwater photography for the first time, we've got many cameras that you can take underwater and give it a try. But if you're an experienced diver, we also have lots of toys for you to play with. So we've got lots of the new backscatter toys, such as the backscatter snoots. We've also got the lots of diopters for you to try out. But also having equipment here for sale is really useful, because if you ever need a spare part, for instance, if your fiber optic cable snaps underwater, that can ruin your whole trip. So we've got that spare there available, so you can carry on actually taking photographs underwater. Also, this photo on the left, so this is our classroom area. So I do teach a lot of courses at the resort, and that's from very basic concepts of macro photography and lighting to more advanced techniques. Also teaching video and the post-processing. So we have Adobe Photoshop, Lightroom, and Adobe Premiere. Also, in the unfortunate event of your equipment failing, we can troubleshoot or actually repair it here on site and try to get you back in the water as soon as possible with your camera. So the type of diving that most people come to Lembeh to do is muck diving. If you haven't been muck diving before, the name doesn't sound that appealing, but it's really, really fantastic diving. It's very different to your usual kind of reef diving or wharf diving. It's much more photographically rich. On one dive, you can easily see 20 different species, and there's lots of opportunities for us to actually take photographs of these subjects, because most of them don't actually move, or if they do move, then they're very slow moving. This is because most of the subjects are ambush predators, so they're trying to hide inside of their environment. So they'll be in there hiding until prey will come along, and then they ambush and hunt that prey. But this is also the challenge when it actually comes to photographing them. Because some of the subjects blend so well within their environment, we need to know how to expose them and how to use our lights or our strobes correctly to really make that subject stand out from that background. So here's a few things that you're able to see, and you're able to actually see this all in one dive if you're lucky enough. So like Tarkan mentioned in his presentation, we have many different types of octopus, 15 types of octopus. So we've got the famous blue ring. This is probably on everyone's bucket list, and also the mimic. We've got these pygmy yellow gobies. These guys are one of the favorites for macro shooters. They usually are living in discarded beer bottles that are laying on the sand. So they're really, really fun subjects to go out and photograph. Bobtail squids, this was actually during a blackwater dive. Usually see these guys on the bottom, on the sand, but this guy was swimming around for me. We have loads of different types of frogfish. So this one, black hairy frogfish, really, really great subject. Lots of different types of pygmy seahorses, gobies and blennies, a wide variety of nudibranchs of all different colors, and then loads of crabs and shrimps. Got the Coleman shrimp and the ghost pipefish also. Obviously, there's lots more subjects, just couldn't fit them all onto one page. Okay, so moving on to how do we actually make our photos stand out from the muck, from their environment. So muck diving isn't usually an attractive environment for us to actually photograph. And we usually want to isolate that subject from its habitat, because that background can actually be quite distracting. And we want to make sure when we're photographing these subjects that when someone is to view that photo, they are looking at your subject and not at a piece of rubble or a piece of stone that's on the sand. So we need to learn how we can use shadows to really make our subject pop out and be isolated from that background. So I'm just going to run through some techniques during this presentation, which will hopefully help you. So I'm going to be talking about two strobes and using them on different powers. So very similar to studio photography, where we have a key light and a fill light. And then moving down just to using one strobe, and then some more advanced techniques of using a snoot, and then creative techniques of colorful backgrounds. Okay, so this is the kind of standard setup that most people will have. They'll have two strobes either side of their camera, pointing straight forward at their subject. And then we're using that cone of light just to actually light the subject and not light the water between the lens and the subject itself. Now, what most people tend to do is have these strobes on at the same power, because that's what you will usually use when you're doing wide angle. But this is going to give us very flat lighting. Now, there's nothing wrong with that kind of lighting, and it definitely works in some situations. But what I like to tell people is, let's turn down one of these strobes. And what that is going to do is to turn one strobe into the key. The key is your brighter strobe. And then your lower power strobe is going to be the field light. The difference between it, I usually are doing 2 clicks or 3 clicks down. So about a stop or a stop and a half. But depending what the difference is between the strobes, that you're going to achieve quite a different effect. But what that key light is going to do for us is it's going to light up and expose the main subject's body and then cast one shadow to one side. The fill light is just in there just to fill in that shadow so it doesn't go to complete black, so that we can still see some detail on that side of that subject. And that's going to create dimension in your photographs. It's going to make your subject look more 3D, more dimensional. But we can actually swap around where the key light and that fill light are positioned. And it all depends on the kind of subject that you are shooting. So I like to have it the other way around with subjects such as the hairy frogfish. Now, the thing about the hairy frogfish is that it's hairy. So for us to really make it look even more hairy is to make sure that we're enhancing those hairs on the body with our lighting by creating shadows. So having that right strobe now as our key light, that's going to cast some shadows on its lower body, and these hairs that are on the body are going to really stick out. I've got some examples to show you now. So this is the example with a coconut octopus. So I'm shooting with a Sony A7 III camera, 90mm lens. This was quite a large coconut octopus, so I had to be quite far back to be able to get the whole subject in. But I'm still shooting at quite a small aperture of f/18. This is going to help me achieve that black background. And also a fast shutter speed is going to cut out most of the ambient light. So this shot is taken during the day, even though I've got that black background. So having that right strobe as the key light, our strongest power, it's going to light up this side of its body. And then having the fill on the left is just going to fill in some of these shadows. But the important thing to look in this photograph is have a look in the background. The sand here, you can see, but on this side, you can't. So there is less distractions for us to look at. And now we're only looking at our main subject. If I was to shoot this at the same power, we're going to see a lot more of this sand. Maybe there's some rubble and rocks here. It would also expose that. Going to the other technique of swapping around the key and the fill. So have a look where the shadows are on this subject. You can see all the hairs on this side of the body. And that's because it's got a drop shadow and they're coming this way. So what I did with that left strobe as the key light, I actually brought it up to about the 10 o'clock position, even up to 11, and then pointing the strobe back down towards the sand. And that's going to create that little drop shadow for me. But if I didn't have that strobe at a stronger power, you wouldn't necessarily see these hairs on the body. If these strobes were the same power, it would create quite flat lighting, so it wouldn't look as hairy. So just making that small little adjustment of turning this strobe a little bit higher than the right one is going to create those shadows for us. Okay, so moving on to one strobe. This is something that I do with a lot of my students when they do courses with me. I will actually make them go out and use only one strobe. This is a really, really great way to learn about shadows. So doing this technique is obviously going to give you a much more moody, dramatic photographs because they're harder shadows. But with some subjects, it works really, really well, especially these type of painted frogfish. So again, I've got now only one light, which is my key light, and taking it to the right side of the subject and using that cone only to touch its face. So I'm not lighting any of the background on the left-hand side. Again, using similar settings of a small aperture, f22, 250th, ISO 100. That's going to make sure that all of my ambient light has disappeared and this goes to black, and it creates a really nice portrait of our subjects. But also because it's coming to one side of a subject, it's creating all of these shadows, which is creating a lot more texture with our subject. Okay, so moving on to some more advanced techniques. So if you are looking to get that perfect black background, then your best friend is going to be a snoot. If you don't know what a snoot is an attachment that we put over our strobe, and that's going to channel down, narrow down that beam of light. There's lots of different snoots on the market, but by far my favorite snoot is the backscatter mini flash snoot. This is a great little tool. It's a very, very small tool, so it's very easy to move around that snoot. And then with it, we usually have these, what we call aperture cards. And this is a little piece of plastic with different size holes or different size apertures. And that's going to control how wide or how narrow that beam of light is going to come out the end of the snoot. Now, the idea of the snoot is not necessarily what we want to expose, but what we don't want to expose. So for my subjects that are on the seabed, where it's on rubble or sand, and that environment doesn't necessarily enhance the photo in any way, I am going to choose not to light up that sand. So I'm going to only light up the face. With other subjects, you may want to include the environment. It all depends on your subject and what you're trying to tell with your photograph. My go-to position with the snoot usually is above the subject and aiming back down about a 45-degree angle. With the snoot itself, it has a focus light, so it's really easy. You point it at your subject, put on that focus light, and you can see what your photo might look like before you even take it. The closer you're going to be with the snoot to your subject, you're going to get a much harder edge to that circle, and then the further away you're going to be, it's going to feather out that edge. So you don't want to be too close with it. We want that nice feathered edge, and that way it's going to wrap around our subject and it'll have a nicer fall off. The light will have a nicer fall off on the actual subject itself. So here's a comparison between normal front lighting and then using a snoot. Both of these photographs are straight out of camera, so haven't actually applied any editing at all. So the photo on the left, using that front lighting, I have to use a shallower depth field here just to get rid of some of the distractions, but you can see it's quite flat lighting. I do have a couple of shadows just below the subject, just as my strobes are a little bit higher up, but it's quite flat. I don't have much contrast going on here. Compared to the snoot, again, closing down that aperture to achieve that black background, high shutter speeds, cutting out all of that ambient light. And now I'm just exposing just the subject, but also pay attention to the amount of color contrast that is on the subject. And that's because I'm using this backscatter snoot. The snoot is a optical snoot, so it actually has glass inside the snoot, and that's going to transmit as much light down that. Other snoots that are on the market will chuck out a lot of light, so you don't get the same kind of contrast. So with the snoot, there isn't a right or wrong way of actually positioning where it should be to your subject. I always encourage people to put the snoot in all kinds of positions and really directing the light in different ways and see what effects you're gonna get. So with this particular hairy frogfish, I was aiming it right down into its face, pointing straight into its face here. Got lucky with the yawn, and I really like the kind of texture it has given me by using this position. You don't have to point directly down at your subject all the time or the 45-degree angle. You can shoot behind for some backlighting or shoot from the side. And shooting from the side has actually created some really nice effects for me. Also, the snoot comes with different shaped aperture cards. So the standard one are circular, and then it comes with another one with oval shapes. And the oval shapes are really, really helpful for when you are shooting at a 45-degree angle. If you're shooting with a circular aperture, that doesn't become a circle anymore. But using the oval cards and turning the snoot, we can actually make it turn back into an actual circle. Also, it's really useful for subjects such as nudibranchs, where their bodies are slightly longer than they are wider. So you can actually match the shape of the subject. So all of these photographs here are done with the snoot. And you can see that it does create a really powerful, big impact photographs of all of our subjects. And it can really, really help our subjects stand out from its environment. And now the viewer is only focusing on that subject. But when it comes to a macro portfolio, maybe you don't want all of your photographs to have this black background. Maybe we want to mix it up a little bit more and be a little bit more diverse with our photographs. So we can add some color. So how are we going to get colorful photographs without that distracting background? Well, simply like we do with other types of photography, we can just play around with our aperture and our depth of field to blur it out. So yeah, the apertures that I'm usually using for this technique, I'm usually using between 5.6 to f4. I find if you do go even wider than that with your aperture, it can be quite difficult to get your subject really sharp in focus. So the best thing to do is to make sure that you're taking as many photos as possible when you're doing this type of technique. Other ways I am focusing, I will go into manual focus at this point, and then just bring in the housing back and forth with my hands, what we call rock focusing, and waiting until the subject's in focus and hitting that shutter. Also, I'm shooting with a Sony camera, so I do have available focus peaking. So if you guys don't know what this is going to give me a red overlay on my photograph, and it's going to show me my depth of field, what's in focus. So that really helps me to make sure when I'm doing this rock focusing, when it's on the eye, I know it's on the eye because of that red overlay. So the kind of lighting for these photographs to create those really rich, colorful backgrounds, we need to make sure that our strobes are pointing straight forward, because we need to make sure we are lighting up that background as well. So again, I'm 3.5 on this one, so quite a big aperture, but behind the blue ring octopus here, it's actually just sand. But using that big aperture, I've been able to blur it all out. The anemone fish below, this was a green anemone behind it, but you can see it's just turned into that beautiful bouquet that we love. Okay, so going on to some more colorful backgrounds. So when people are doing macro photography, what they tend to do is they'll try to get their subject as big as possible within the frame. Now, this is a type of photography that I've really been enjoying recently, where we actually have a small subject that's reasonably small in the frame. And when it is that small, the background, it becomes as important as the subject. So we need to create some really good contrast between our subject and the background itself. So we want to look for complementary colors. Now, complementary colors goes into color theory, and we could talk about color theory for hours and hours. This is a simple color wheel. There are different versions of the color wheel. But what a complementary color is opposite colors on that color wheel. So for instance, with this RAS here, we've got some reds going on. So opposite the reds, we go to the green, and then we got the green background. And having those two colors against each other, they compete for the space, and that's what's creating that contrast. And it really creates great impact within your image. Again, here we've got the sexy shrimp, which is a orangey, yellowy color, and then going straight down there, we've got the purple and violet colors of this anemone. Okay, so when we actually, once we know all of these techniques, it's really good to mix it up. I wouldn't necessarily say when you find a subject, try every single technique. But if the best thing about Lembeh is when you find a subject, you can usually go back there the next day and find it again. And that's what's really great about Lembeh diving, is that we continuously can shoot the same subject. So that means we can really mix it up with our techniques. And that's what's going to create a really interesting portfolio for you. So we can do the standard nice black background, then we can do some nice blue backgrounds by opening up our shutter speeds, just using one strobe light. I got very lucky this day, blue ring with its eggs, and then creating some very colorful bouquet, which I'm going to go on how to do this technique in a second. And then playing around with some slow shutter speeds to create some texture within our background. So you can see one subject here, but using 5 different techniques. Okay, so you guys have probably seen very similar photos like this online. It's been very popular over the last couple of years, and it's creating some artificial colored bokeh. Some people love it, some people hate it. but it's a really good technique to actually go out and play with. So even if it's not your cup of tea, I do recommend maybe just spend one dive and just to try out the technique yourself. So this again is using shallow depth of field, but this time we're going to have a artificial background and add some color to that to create these nice big bokeh balls behind our subject. So this is my go-to method of creating this technique. So I'm getting a wire brush that you use to wash your dishes. And then I have my muck stick, and I'm just sticking that muck stick through that wire brush and then placing it in the sand behind the subject. Then I'm going to have some off-camera lighting. So here I'm using a video light with a color filter, a green color filter to shine on that reflective wire brush. And then in front, I'm using a snoop just to expose my subject and then framing it up to make sure that wire brush is filling the frame in the background. And using that shallow depth of field, a big aperture of f4, it's going to give me those nice bokehs. I actually find the best kind of aperture to do this technique is actually 7.1. That way the bokeh balls aren't too big, but they're not too small. And yeah, so I recommend shooting at 7.1 and below. There are other ways of doing this bokeh technique. I've seen people go down with slates and using glitter, but I don't personally like that technique myself because that glitter can obviously pollute the water and come off. And I've also tried using holographic paper. So you can easily find this in a craft school, craft shop, or on Amazon online. But the only problem is paper in water tends to break down. So I have tried laminated that, but then the laminate reflects a lot of the light away, so it doesn't work as well. So if you are going to try this technique, I do recommend the wire brush. Okay, so now going on to some more creative techniques and adding some cool colors to our photographs. So Backscatter have recently come out with their new color filter system. So this is a little attachment that will fit onto their mini flash, their brand new video light, and also it actually attaches to the snoot as well. And there's two sets of colors. So we have these bold colors. So these are very vibrant and very saturated colors. And then we have our more subtle, I forget what they're called now, pastel colors. So their pastel color set is a little bit more subtle. So here's some photographs I shot using the color filter system. And what I really enjoy about that color filter system is you're getting a very, very different photograph that you don't see that a lot of people have. So it can really make your portfolio really stand out from the crowd, having some of these quite unique, colorful photographs. Again, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but you can definitely do it more on the subtle side, like this frogfish, and you don't necessarily see that there's been an added artificial color added to this photograph. They're fantastic to actually do some backlighting with. So this particular shot of a white-eyed moray eel, what I did is I had one snoot with a purple color filter on, and I passed that to my dive guide. My dive guide went around to the other side of the eel, and he's pointing it directly at that eel. And then I'm in front with another snoot attached to the camera, and I'm just adding a little bit of fill light to the face. And that way we get that nice pink outline of the eel, but we can still see the detail from that little bit of fill light from the front. This one, this crab in the anemone, this was very easy to do by myself. So again, off-camera lighting, I actually used a video light for this one, the backscatter video light, place it behind this tube anemone, and then I'm in front again, using a snoot just to highlight just my subject, and then that pink is coming through the anemone itself. This one, only using one light, and I've also backlit this photograph as well. I did actually manage to backlight this by myself without any guide's help. So it can be quite tricky at first, but what I tend to do if I am going to do any backlighting by myself and it's attached to my camera, when I first go down on a dive, I'll just find a rock and then I'll place my arm right out from my housing with the snoot and strobe attached, pointing it directly back towards the camera, and at the rock itself, I'll lock the focus and do a few test shots and just making sure that that light is actually hitting the back of that rock. Now I have locked the focus, I know when I move on to the subject and rock focus now with the camera and the housing, once my subject comes in focus in my frame, then I know that light is positioned correctly and it will hit my subject correctly as well. With this frogfish, again, off-camera lighting from the right-hand side, pointing directly down at the frogfish. And it just gives this little nice halo effect on the right side of that frogfish, which just makes it pop out from its background that little bit more. And then again, adding a little bit of fill light from the front with a snoot so we can actually see the detail in the frogfish's face. This particular image here, this actually got highly commended in Underwater Photographer of the Year. So these sea pens are usually quite a pink color anyway, but I wanted to jazz it up a little bit more, adding a little bit more vibrance to that sea pen. So I just placed two snoots with video lights on the sand, either side of that sea pen, lighting just the sea pen itself. And then luckily there was this little juvenile filefish taking shelter in this sea pen. And then with my camera and another snoot attached, I'm just lighting the actual filefish itself. And the flash power is always, the white is always going to overpower the colored flash. So that's why you see the filefish not in pink, because the white flash will overpower the color. Okay, so moving on to some more advanced techniques again. So this is still using the backscatter snoot, but now we're going to play around with our shutter speed to get some really cool, interesting effects. So this snake heel is just in the sand. So I've just snooted him like I would usually do with a normal snooted shot. You can see F22, make sure I got a nice depth of field. But then I am now turning my shutter speed to a 1/6 of a second. So that's going to allow all the ambient light to come into my image. And what I make sure is that my camera flash is on first curtain sync. So as soon as I hit that shutter, my flash will fire. And what that will do is it's going to freeze my subject. And as soon as I press it, I'm then whip panning my camera left to right or right to left. And it's going to create all of this cool movement in the background. So this is just ambient light and on the sand, and it's created all this cool texture. And it creates quite an artistic shot. So last year, I was quite obsessed with this technique, and I was trying all different combinations. But then I thought to myself, I don't necessarily want a blue or a cyan colored background. Maybe I want to introduce some other colors in the backgrounds for a more artistic look. So this time on the right-hand side of my camera, I also set up a video light with some color filters. And now I'm exposing the whole background with that color, making sure the snoot only hits my subject, and then doing the same technique. But this one, you can actually see this one's more of a spin. So instead of whip panning the camera left to right, I'm actually turning the camera around, and it's going to create that nice spin for us. And this photo, you know, it's created a really cool movement, quite hypnotic, this photograph. This Tsuma shrimp was in this big coral bush, and this was quite a slow shutter speed. From what I remember, this was about 1 second long, and I just went crazy with it. And it's created all of these really abstract, cool lines that are going on within the photograph. The blue ring octopus here, you can see the movement of the sand. I'm actually bouncing the camera up and down to create this textured look. And then these photographs are your normal whip panning left to right, but using some different colors. So got some purples going on with this Tsuma shrimp here. Okay, so as I mentioned, I do video as well as photography. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some video work, especially with the new Backscatter 4300 video lights that they have. So these video lights are just fantastic for if you're doing macro video, because it enables us to really choose what we want to be exposed, what we actually want to light within our scene. Usually when you're buying video lights, they're made for wide angle, and our video lights are really, really wide, and it's just going to light up the whole scene. But as I mentioned, we don't necessarily want that when it comes to muck diving, because that background can be distracting. So the video light on its own, it does actually have two modes. So we've got a wider beam for the wide angle, and then we've actually got a much narrower beam for macro. And this video here is shot just using the actual macro mode within this video light. So I'm just going to play this now. So this is a coconut octopus with eggs. Again, got very lucky finding this subject. It was in a discarded glass jar, and it had found a little shell to protect itself. But having that glass jar was really cool, because it means that you could actually see the eggs as well. I actually took the video lights off the camera, and I'm just placing them on the sand out of frame to light up this. This video was shot on a Olympus TG6, so not a big camera, a very simple point and shoot camera, but it's created this really cool footage. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so yeah, just a really short clip. I just want to pause it on this section here. So again, you can see that I'm using the same techniques as I was with the photography. So here I've just placed the light behind the jar to create this backlight, and it's just created this really nice halo effect around our subject. And then with my light that's on now on the camera itself, I'm pointing it straight forward for a little bit of feel, just so we can see the detail. But I'm focusing purely on the subject here. We're not getting distracted too much by any of that surrounding background. Okay, so another fantastic thing about the backscatter video light is that we're able to use the backscatter snoot, and it's the same snoot that you would use on the mini flash. So they fit on the video light and also the strobe itself. So before, it was very, very difficult to get any kind of decent footage using a snoot with a video light, because there's never really been one designed for a video light. There's been a few DIY versions, but by doing that, we were losing a lot of light. So Backscatter really created this video light with this in mind, for us to be able to use that snoot. So this video is just going to show you a few examples of just using the video light on its own, and then the same subject, but with the snoot added. And you can see the kind of effect that it gives. Okay, so again, we can use also these new color filter system also with the video lights as well. So this is obviously going to give you a much more artistic video, but I had great fun using these colored lights while shooting video, especially for this kind of backlighting and some of the techniques that I've already shown you on how to use it with photography. And now we can use it with video. So again, if you're looking for a really cool, different portfolio, these are just great tools to have to make your work stand out and be different to everyone else. Okay. Okay, so I just want to go on to now about experimenting. So this is actually one of my biggest joys when it comes to underwater photography, especially being in a place like Lembeh. I'm very fortunate of having a place like Lembeh where I can go out and try all these new techniques and really just try to experiment, see what I can actually come out with. So this is a few techniques that I've been kind of playing with that I want to share with you. And please, if you do try any of these techniques yourself, I would love to hear from you to see how they actually work for you. And I would love to see your results as well. So this technique of changing the shape of your aperture, this is definitely not a new technique, but I'd never really seen it underwater before. So what I did, as Tarkan mentioned, we have a 3D printer within the photo center. So what I did is I created this 3D printed disc and then cut out a love heart shape in the middle. And then I'm just placing that over my lens. And what that's going to do is now I won't have circular bokeh, but now I'm going to have bokeh in the shape that I've created, which is the love hearts here. And I started off using some artificial backgrounds. So here we had a holographic paper that I had lit with a video light, and now it's not circles, but we get in these love hearts. A very cheesy photo, but it was great for our Valentine's Facebook post for the resort. But whilst I was on that dive, I was looking around at my camera and I noticed that actually some elements underwater and some coral with very high contrast were actually taking on this shape of the love heart. So here we have a crinoid. As you can see, we've got these white tips and the black stems, and that's created that really nice contrast for us. And in the background, they're not this shape anymore, but they've actually turned into the shape of the actual love hearts as well. Also with this particular shot, so we've got this anemone with the cardinal fish, and then in the background it was a brain coral, and also that brain coral had really good contrast going on, and it took upon that love heart shape for us. And obviously you can create not just love hearts, you can create different shapes, and I'm still experimenting with this technique still at the moment. But what I found particularly interesting with this photograph is if we zoom in, the actual backscatter was actually turning into these love heart shapes. So maybe it's the new way of how to get rid of backscatter. We just changed the shape of it. So I found that very, very interesting. Okay, so I really love to look outside of the underwater world, and I try to look at as many different types of photography as possible. And I really encourage you guys to do the same, because we can take really big inspirations from other photographers and the kind of techniques they're using, and then trying to apply that underwater. So as I said, I'm always trying to look for these kind of new techniques, and if I haven't seen it underwater before, but I've seen it on land, I'm going to try to do it underwater. So there's this technique called stroboscopic photography. Now, it's definitely not a new technique. This was being done back in the 1940s, probably made most famous by Life magazine photographer Jean Milly. And he took these photographs in a studio where the strobe or the flash is firing multiple times in one exposure. And that's why we get all of these different steps and stages of the subject itself, because that flash is freezing that subject on that frame. So you might recognize this guy. This is Alfred Hitchcock. And then we've got the ballerina movement of this. And what I particularly love about this technique is how it really tells a story. And I find this probably one of the most challenging things when it comes to macro photography, because how can we show more of a story on what's going on with our macro photography? Usually macro photography is showing the details within that subject. And for sure, that does tell us a story, but how about telling some different types of stories? How can we use that? Well, using this idea of this stroboscopic, I was able to take it underwater and produce this yawning frogfish. So yeah, this hopefully shows a story of the frogfish yawning and the different stages of that yawn. So that was my idea of using the stroboscopic idea. The way that I set it up is I actually did some off-camera lighting. So I used the Retro LSD snoot, and I actually placed it on a Gorilla tripod and then connected that to a flash trigger. So this is the anglerfish trigger. And then I also had one strobe on my camera rig itself. And when that strobe fires on my camera, it's going to hit this flash trigger and also fire the snoot. So I had the snoot hitting my frogfish's face, and then I'm panning left to right and try to time it perfectly so that the frogfish lines up as 1, 2, 3. So how do you get the flash to fire more than once? I use a flash trigger on my camera system from a company called TRT Electronics. So this is the S-Turtle. This is the flash trigger for Sony cameras. With this, it comes with some software and actually has a stroboscopic mode, and you can choose how many times that flash is going to fire. I also believe the new retro strobes that are now on the market actually have this built into the strobe. I haven't had a chance to play with them yet, but it's definitely something I want to try. What I also found with this technique is actually it's most likely better to do it during a night dive, because that way you don't have to compete with the ambient light. Because for you to get a perfect image where they are not overlapping each other, you need to use quite slow shutter speeds, but you also need to match that up with your panning of the camera itself. So using that slow shutter speed, obviously it's going to allow in lots of ambient light, but then we can't see the subject as clearly. So if we do it at nighttime, then it will give us a better exposure on our actual subject. So I really hope this has given you some new, different ideas. And I do say again, please, if you do try any of these techniques, then please get in contact with me. I would love to see your work. And don't be afraid to fail. With all of these techniques, you are going to fail, but through that failure, you will find some winning images. And it's really going to give your portfolio a whole different new look, and you'll be able to stand out from the rest of the photographers that we have. So I just want to finish up by saying thank you to everyone. If you do want to get in contact with us, our website is lembehresort.com. I'm sure Tarkan has mentioned this as well. So please do go on our website. Also on our website, you will find some information more about the resort. And also we have our workshops on there. So if you'd like to join us for any workshops in the future, all of that information is on the Lembeh Resort website. Also, if you wish, you can visit my website, jephotovideo.com, if you wish to see any of my own personal work as well. And I also are on Instagram at emery.aquatic. Thank you.
James, thanks a lot for this nice presentation. So we made you a bit tired, but it was worth listening to you the whole time. You were telling us some very nice details about underwater photography and videography. Thanks a lot again for joining us, for accepting our invitation. So meanwhile, while you were speaking, I received a lot of CVs. They want to reach you and they ask you if you need some employees around there. I was just kidding. I was kidding. Actually, I want to tell the audience is that another interesting part is beginning where people can forward their questions to James. So either in Turkish language or English language, because if you ask in Turkish, our interpreter will translate your question to James. But first, what you need to raise hand. You need to raise hand from the participants button, which is underneath the Zoom window. So if you have any questions, please raise your hands as Alpcan did. So I'm just going to give you a word so that you can forward your question to James. The questions in the chat part is okay, but I'll give priority to those who raise hands. So first question is coming from Alpcan. Alpcan, please.
Thank you very much, Muratan. James, it was a great talk. It was really helpful and very experimental, especially in the last parts that I sometimes cannot understand what you were trying to do, but that was great. So my question is, actually, I have two questions, one for you and one for Tarkan. The question was, I probably missed the technique that you make the background blurry or from panning from left to right or right to left, 1/6 shutter speed with a f12, f22. So what was the camera mode at this point? I presume that it was like a back curtain or something?
So you do need the flash mode in your first curtain because you want the flash curtain up first. That will freeze your subject. And as soon as I'm pressing that shutter, I'm moving the camera straight away afterwards. Because
it's just particular to, sorry.
Because what you want to do, because we're lighting the subject with the snoot, you need to line up the snoot with your subject first. If we had it on second curtain, we would never get the subject snooted correctly.
Okay, so the first curtain is the key point. I have to check whether I had this opportunity or not in my strobes, right? It's just a strobe feature or something?
It should be
the camera feature?
Camera settings.
Camera settings, okay. Thank you very much. Muratan, can I ask my question to Tarkan at the same time, or we will do it afterwards?
Sure. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Tarkan. Should I speak in Turkish or English?
Turkish is fine as well.
Turkish is fine. Tamam. Tarkan, memnun oldum. Ben 3 kere Lembeh'e gittim. Sizin tesiste değildik ama şöyle bir şey geldi başıma. İkisi iyiydi ama bir tanesinde beni bir küçük stonefish soktu. Ve yani ben ölüm tehlikesine çok yaklaştım. Yani ölüme çok yaklaştım. Neden o? Şunu söylemek için araya girdim. Şimdi o Bitung denen küçük köyde biz tabii apar topar ıslak ıslak elbiselerle sağlık merkezine koşturduk jipin içinde. Yani elbiselerimizi bile çıkaracak durumda değildik. Benim buddy'm de benimle geldi sağ olsun. Ve o sağlık merkezi berbat bir yer tabii. Yani ben oradaki çocukları falan görünce kendi ağrımı da unuttum. Ben de doktorum. Bir süre bekledikten sonra orada doktor yoktu. Sonunda kendi orderimi kendim verdim ve steroid ve ağrı kesici yaptırdım kendime. Yani onlar da anladılar ne istiyorsanız yapalım diye. Şimdi burada yani 2 tane çok temel girişim var. Yani bir tanesi hava yolunu açmak, bir tanesi steroid ve ağrı kesicileri damardan yapmak. Sağlık merkeziniz var mı bilmiyorum ama Lembeh ve benzeri yerler çok ciddi anlamda aynı fotoğrafçılar için tehlike arz ediyor. Çünkü bu biraz önce gösterdiği teknikleri kullanabilmek için bazen kuma yatıyorsun, saatlerce bekliyorsun vesaire. Orası aynı zamanda çok tehlikeli, canlıların da cenneti. Ve benim de başıma böyle bir şey geldi. Yani bu kadar lüks ve bu kadar keyifli bir ortam böyle bir balık yüzünden cehenneme dönüyor. Onu söylemek istedim. Eğer sağlık merkeziniz vardır mutlaka ama bu tür önlemleri almanızı şiddetle öneririm. Çok teşekkür ederim.
Sağ olun. Bu çok önemli bir konu aslında. İyi dediniz. Ne zaman en son Lembeh'teydiniz? Hangi yıldı bu olay?
Lembeh'e bilmem ki 3-4 sene oldu galiba. 4-5 sene falan oldu.
Okey. Şimdi şu anda Lembeh'te yeni klinikler açılmış durumda bir. Daha değişik modern kliniklerimiz var. Lembeh değil de Bitung'da. Aynı zamanda hastaneler daha da geliştirildi bu Covid süresinin sırasında. Bir de aslında çok iyi bir konuya değindin. Çünkü dalış rehberine de bağlı bu bir olay, başınıza gelen olay. Yani sonuçta bu dalış rehberleri de aslında bir ortaya bir kontrol etmek zorundalar. O da dalış rehberlerinin eğitimine biraz geliyor gibi geldi bana. Çünkü böyle olayları biz daha yaşamak Allah göstermesin. Tekrar inşallah yaşamayız ama yani tabii olabilir fakat rehberlerin de biraz dikkat etmesi lazım. O yüzden bizim rehberlerimiz bu konular için de eğitimli. Yani dalış liderlerinden rehberden rehbere de değişiyor tabii.
Sağ olasın.
Evet, teşekkür ederiz Alp Hocam sorun için. James, while waiting some other questions from the participants, I myself want to ask you a question. Are we always limited to the minimum flash speed synchronization, still like 1 divided by 250 seconds, or do you know any available tools, strobes, which can make high-speed syncs with camera? So, which is quite important when you would like to make bokeh effects with strobes. So, do you think is there any strobe available in the market from Backscatter or any other vendor which can make high-speed sync underwater?
Yes, there is. So the new Retro Pro strobes actually have that available now.
Cool.
So I believe there's 2 versions of these strobes. There's the Pro version and then the Pro X version. The difference between them, I believe, is only the actual strobe output power. But they both have that high-speed sync technology now available within the strobes. I'm definitely very keen to get my hands on these strobes because that would also work for my stroboscopic techniques.
Yeah, I think it will bring a lot of difference to underwater photography especially in terms of macro photography.
Yeah, definitely. especially when we have some of the hunting action going on with our macro. For instance, a cuttlefish sticking out its beak to pick up a shrimp to eat. If we can have that high-speed sync going on with that, that'd be great.
Okay, perfect. And I have a question in the chat section. So Eda, my friend is asking you if you are using dolly effect, dolly zoom effect in your videography and photography works. So you are zooming in and you are going backwards. So like, you know,
yeah,
giving
the trombone.
The background to the background. The object stays same. I mean, actually not stays same, but it looks like it stays same. But the background flows away like that.
Yeah, made famous in Jaws.
Okay.
It's called the
that's true.
effect. So yeah, I personally haven't actually tried it underwater. I think it would be quite difficult to achieve, especially when it comes to macro photography, just because we are using longer lenses. So it's going to be hard to make sure that we keep our subject within that frame. But I think it's definitely a technique we might be able to use with some of the more wide angle lenses, especially the new extended macro wide angle lens from Nauticam. It's really close focus wide angle. Having that wide angle coverage is definitely going to help with that technique, rather having that narrow field of view.
Yeah, that's true. So we are continuing with questions if it's okay for you.
Of course.
Okay. Jem, go ahead.
Thank you, Muratan. James, Tarkan, it was a great presentation. Especially James, the photos that you have submitted were great. The colorful, the new techniques, they are all great. But you know, there is some points that I want to ask you.
Sure.
You diverted from natural color of underwater photography to with a full of backlight colors. You turn it to colorful backgrounds and new techniques. How did you decide that? I mean, how did you make up your mind to have tried something else? Because I am a little bit old-fashioned guy. I mean, the natural is natural, you know. Of course, there are so many ways to have great photos with the natural lights as well. But how did you decide to divert this colorful photos?
So I believe it's because I'm diving day in, day out in Lembeh, and I've got that time to do something different.
Something else, yeah.
Yeah, so I would never get bored of shooting with natural light. I think natural light is beautiful, but also I believe, especially in today's world, to really be able to stand out, you do need to be doing something quite different. So that's why I'm always looking for these new techniques, just to stand out and be a little bit different. And lots of people are afraid to do that. And I do believe that the underwater photography are, you know, they get taught in a certain way. It has to be these settings and using natural light. And that's great to start with. But I just really enjoy experimenting with all these different techniques. So I've been always quite creative the whole of my life, and that's how I ended up.
Great. It's a great job. Thank you so much. I only had a one time to visit Lembeh. And it was so many years ago, and it was a dia analog photography. So now after this presentation, I am now again dying to be there one more time. Hope in this healthy times. Thank you very much. Muratan, thank you very much as well. Good luck.
Thanks a lot, Cem. So just checking the chat bar if there are questions. Okay. So I have another question for you, James, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So during your presentation, you mentioned somewhere that you use manual focus, which sometimes saves your life, especially in macro photography. But I just want to ask this during shooting videos. Are you from that group of people who prefer continuous autofocus, or are you a sort of person who prefers completely manual focus in videography like me?
So I believe it all depends on your camera and the tools that you have. It really does depend on the system that you have. So obviously autofocus is getting really good with new technology, and especially with some of the Sony cameras. So I'm quite biased about Sony because I've been shooting with them for the last 5 years.
You say A7, S3?
So yeah, I did shoot video with the A7S III. I had that for the last 6 months, shooting video with it, and it's fantastic. But the only thing that Sony is lacking on is an updated version of their macro lens, and that can be quite slow focusing. So what I actually tend to do is I will shoot mainly in manual focus, but I have customized a button on the back of the housing where it's a toggle switch. And when I press and hold this down, it will go into autofocus. So I have that ready available to me if I am wanting to use autofocus. Maybe my subject is moving out of the depth of field that I've set, because I am usually shooting with a tripod when it comes to macro photography. So I don't want to be lifting up the camera because that's going to create too much movement. So then I might press down that button. It will switch to the autofocus and hopefully track my subject. But for the majority of my shots, I will be set in manual focus.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. So there's another question again from Eda. Previously, she asked from chat window. Now she is available directly. Eda.
Thank you very much. Good night. Sorry, I can't open my video because I'm work in hospital again.
Oh.
I want to ask James, have you used back to tone focus before? Back to tone focus. And what did you think? Yeah, back button, sorry. Yeah. What did you think, and how we can use, because I want to try new and I want your opinion.
Okay, so if you have a DSLR camera or some of the newer mirrorless cameras, then back button focus is the first thing you should change on your camera settings for underwater photography. It's a fantastic way to make sure that we're not going to miss any shots and that they will make sure that they are in focus. What back button focus is going to do is just separate the focus from the actual shutter button. So if once my subject's in focus, I can press that shutter button as many times as possible and get a number of shots. If that shutter button is also trying to achieve autofocus for me, it's going to lag behind, so I won't be able to get as many shots as I would like. But when it comes to some of the smaller compact cameras, it all does depend on the camera itself and also the housing, where you're able to actually set a customized button to be your autofocus, and wherever your housing actually has that as a button available on the outside. So you do need to check on the camera that you have, and if it is suitable for back button focus. But if it is, I definitely recommend it.
Thank you very much. Do you use do you use back button for super macro?
Sorry?
Do you use back button focus for super macro photography? Super.
Yes.
Or you choose just only manual focus?
So I do switch between the two. So if I'm doing super macro photography, I might press that back button focus to get it reasonably close in focus. And once it's in there, then quickly switch to manual focus and then adjust it to achieve more sharp focus.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's just to speed up the workflow underwater.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Eda, for your question. James, I realized that you use tripod legs for macro photography as well. Is this correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay, I actually recently purchased tripod legs from Backscatter, luckily. Yeah. But I just ordered them for macro videography. So I believe they are very crucial. They are very crucial tools,
yeah,
especially in macro videography, since there is no way you can stabilize your camera, even if there are some 5-axis or sensor-based stabilization in your lens or in your. But I wouldn't think it for micro photography. But I realize now that you also use it for photography as well.
So for photography, I'm only using the tripod for the actual strobe itself,
okay.
That stroboscopic technique. I have also put my housing on a tripod as well for photography. When I've in Thailand, I did some light painting underwater as a technique, and that way I needed to stabilize the camera in some way. But usually if I'm doing photography, then I wouldn't use a tripod.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot, James. I checked the chat part and also the raising hand part, and I don't see any more questions. So it's almost 2 hours by now. Thanks for...
Murat'ın soru var.
Yes. You are tricking me, huh? When I start to come to a conclusion, Ferhan is raising hand. Ferhan, okay, I'm just giving you the word. Please forward your question however you wish. If you want to ask it in English, you should be in English channel, or you can ask it in Turkish channel, and the translator will take place. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Murat. First, thank you for presentation. Very beautiful. Thank you very much. And your job is very, very beautiful job. And you're very lucky in that you can write a lot of much option for photography. My question is, are you trying to diopter or any wet lens in Lembeh? because we're looking to in the presentation some little bit big animal, but have a very small animal, or we using the normal lens just in the dive in the Lembeh for Lembeh. My first question: are you using the diopter or have an animal for diopter? My second question: are you trying another macro lens, for example, Sigma 70 millimeter lens is I am using for Sony some systems, this different lens and maybe different possible to try.
Yes, so I use diopters on a regular basis. So my kind of go-to is the Nauticam SMC. We have many small subjects in Lembeh where you definitely need this. So some of the pygmy seahorses photographs that you saw previously in the presentation, this was shot with that SMC. But yeah, we've got hairy shrimp, which are less than 1 centimeter in size. So diopters are definitely a must in the Lembeh Strait. But we definitely have subjects where you don't need a diopter as well. I like to use flip diopters where I can just flip it out the way and flip it back down when needed. Second question with other macro lenses. I haven't been able to try out the Sigma lens yet, but it's on my radar. I have adapted a Canon 60 millimeter, but where I'm shooting full frame, I do get a bit of a vignette around the edges because the 60 millimeter for Canon is made for APS-C.
In the 70 millimeter Sigma have a possible that you can use the full frame.
Yes.
Possible crop, but without for full frame have a E mount.
Yes, so that's definitely on my radar, but I also am keeping my fingers crossed that Sony should be doing an updated version of their 90 millimeter lens, because Canon just 2 days ago just released their new 100 millimeter macro lens for their mirrorless camera, and it's got some very nice features on that lens. So I'm hoping Sony takes note and they're able to bring out a new macro lens for us. Because if you can go native, I would rather have a native Sony lens for the Sony cameras.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ferhan. If your questions finished already, we can switch to other questions. Are you okay with the questions?
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
So here we have
thank
a
you very
question.
much for all.
Okay, thank you, Ferhan. We have a question from Professor Murat. I'm saying him Professor Murat because normally when I speak to him in Turkish, I say Murat Hocam. So Murat Hocam, hello.
Hello.
Welcome, how are you?
Thank you. Thank you very much, James, for this great presentation. The more I listen to you guys, the more I understand that underwater photography can be an art form, different from what we are trying to do, which is more like biology type of photography. I just want to say hello, and I missed the beginning of the presentation, unfortunately, but I caught up just after Tarkan had finished talking. I hope he only said nice things about me and us, because he probably told you that we started diving together. He started his first dives with us, and then look what he has become. And I was wondering if he hates me or if he likes me for making him go into diving professionally. I hope he doesn't hate me. but I
No,
will definitely
we love
come
you,
and see you
Murat.
guys in
We
Lembeh.
love you, doctor.
Actually, in Bodrum, they used to call me not professor, but doctor, because I had a PhD in industrial engineering. But as I switched to diving, people kept on calling me doctor, and people that didn't know that they thought I was an underwater medical person. They would come with me and saying, I have a headache, what should I do, type of thing. So anyway, great to see you, Tarkan. Thank you very much, James. I'm sure, I hope all these things clear up and I will be able to come and see you guys in Lembeh, which
Looking
was one of
forward
my
to it.
favorite places where I've been there maybe 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It is
Fantastic.
still the same, it is.
Murat Hocam, the dreams are Lembeh, but the reality is Kaş.
Yes, yes.
Maybe we'll see you in Kaş.
Definitely.
Okay, thanks a lot for your participation. So I realize that there are no more questions, and it has already passed 2 hours. So I just want to once again thank Tarkan and James for accepting us to join this meeting. So before closing the session, I want to give the word to our president of the Association of Underwater Photography and Videography Association, to Ateş Başkan. Ateş Hocam, are you there? Orada mısın?
Buradayım Murat'an. Çok güzel bir gece oldu. James için daha kolay oldu ama Tarkan'ı çok yorduk. Sabaha karşı oldu orada herhalde Tarkan.
Sabah 4 şu anda ama hala ayaktayım hocam. Teşekkürler, sağ olun.
Çok teşekkür ederiz ikinize de. Ben konuşmanın başında da söyledim. Yani Lembeh bir okul gibi bir yer. Bunu boşuna söylemedim yani. Ya, dediğim gibi 7 defa gittim. 8. için sabırsızlanıyorum. Umarım Aralık'ta orada olacağız. James'e de sorularımız orada yüzüne olacak. Onun kendisini yoracağım. Aynı zamanda bütün ekibe çok selamlarımı söyle Tarkan. Julia oradaysa rehberlerin hepsine en kısa zamanda görüşmek üzere diyorum. Tekrar çok teşekkür ederiz hepinize de.
Çok mersi, teşekkürler. Hepinize iyi akşamlar. Çok teşekkür ederim zaman ayırdığınız için bize.
Evet, teşekkür ediyoruz sevgili Tarkan. And thanks a lot James for being here with us. I hope
pleasure.
to see you all, and not only me, I'm sure many participants of this meeting hope to see you soon in Lembeh. Let's dive and let's take some underwater photography shoots in Lembeh. So once again, thanks for your participation, and bye for now. Let's see each other in Lembeh. Bye
Looking
bye.
forward to seeing you all.
Thank you. See you.
Ferhan Bey'e de çok Murat Han, Bahadır Bey'e de çok teşekkür ediyoruz.
Çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Çevirdi.
Sualtı fotoğrafçısı olmamasına rağmen çok iyi iş çıkardığını düşünüyorum.
Derneğe.
Tabii. İyi akşamlar herkese.
İyi akşamlar,
İyi
teşekkürler.
akşamlar.
Çeviriler
İyi
için
akşamlar.
çok teşekkürler.
İyi akşamlar.
Herkese